She said it was just pillates. Then I found his bracelet in our bed. The bracelet was the quiet kind of flashy, a slim band of black leather with a steel clasp, the initials stamped in tiny capitals like they were whispering. AC. It was coiled in the rumple between our pillows, a creature sleeping exactly where my ear usually does. I lifted it with 2 fingers, careful like it might bite. My wife, Mara, has never worn leather unless it came as a jacket in October and looked expensively bored with the weather. She was a silk and linen person, a woman who could make a room want to tuck in its shirt. The bracelet didn't belong, which is the same as saying I suddenly didn't. "Is that mine?" she called from the bathroom, her voice echoing off the tile in a way that made the word ours feel far away. "No," I said, and tasted metal. I didn't ask the other question. The room was humming. Whose then? I stood there with the window open to spring rain and our bed unmade and the bracelet warming in my palm like a fact. We were the kind of couple who used to kiss in supermarkets, who needed a plan only for the first step and then let the rest of the night find us. We weren't perfect, but we were poetic about it. Lately, our conversations had become logistics. Do you have the spare key? Did you book the dog walker? And if I set my hand on her hip in the kitchen, she'd step away not because she didn't want me, but because the roasted carrots needed turning. Pilates ran long, she said when she stepped out, towel folded like a confession across her chest. She was glowing in that precise post-workout way that smells like soap trying to keep up with skin. A new instructor, killer. "What's his name?" I asked, because the bracelet said man to me and maybe I wanted to be wrong. "Alistair," she said, and smiled like the word was an inside joke. "Don't make that face, Callum. He's 26 and allergic to shirts. He says my thoracic spine is stubborn." "Your thoracic spine has always been stubborn," I said, and she laughed, and we kissed slowly enough to reset a clock we weren't checking. I slid the bracelet into the pocket of my jeans when she reached for me again. Her towel found the floor. The rain tightened its rhythm on the window. YouTube can relax. I'll spare us all the syllables that get flagged. I'll just say there are certain moments when a familiar body can feel new, and that night was like finding a door in a wall we'd both forgotten. There was a sweetness to the way she pulled me closer and a hunger in the way I went. She arched, I followed, and when we finally lay still, I pressed my ear to her heartbeat and told myself the bracelet belonged to a client, a careless assistant, a moment that wasn't mine to understand. In the morning, while Mara showered again, "Steam helps recovery," she said, smiling. I held the bracelet up to the light. AC. The clasp was magnetic, a smooth snap, the kind of thing a body learns on instinct. I tried it on. It fit. I didn't like that. I sell wine, which is just a polite way of saying I talk people into listening to their mouths. Tuesday night, I was hosting a tasting in the hotel bar across from the Pilates studio Mara swore by. The bar is all velvet and shadows, and the kind of glass that takes what you pour into it personally. I set out the bottles like I was dealing a kind hand, and checked the door every time it opened because that's who I am. The kind of man who waits with his shoulders squared and his jaw pretending not to clench. They came in pairs and trios, a city's worth of taste arriving in coats still carrying the weather. 30 minutes after the posted start time, the door opened again, and in walked a roomer that had decided to be handsome. Alistair, probably, tall, cut from a cloth that doesn't wrinkle, a t-shirt that did a poor job of pretending to hate attention. His right wrist was bare. His left too. He moved like he'd never noticed gravity because they'd never been introduced. He wasn't alone. Mara slipped in after him, hair up, a black dress hugging the kind of geometry that makes architects reconsider straight lines. She kissed my cheek like the room had instructed her to and took a seat near the middle. Alistair sat exactly one chair away from her, not close enough to be a headline, not far enough to be mistaken. "New friend?" I asked her quietly as I poured the first flight. "Pilates prodigy," she said. "He's a child." He didn't look like a child when he laughed at something the woman beside him said. He looked like a postcard addressed to every room he'd ever entered. "Wish you were here. Wish you were me." I talked about tannins and weather as destiny, about how vineyards are stubborn like families. The second wine was a Barolo that smelled like a cedar chest learning to speak. I caught Mara's eye as she sipped, and she tipped her glass just a little in that way she has when she's telling me I'm listening. "I can hear you." The man next to her, child or not, rested his wrist on the back of her chair. If you were looking at the bottles, you'd miss it. If you were looking at her, you couldn't. During the break, AC introduced himself. "Alistair," he said, offering his hand with the casual authority of someone accustomed to acceptance. Up close, he had that clean sweat smell of a man who lives inside a gym and the world that goes with it. "Callum," I said, "you're making my wife taller." He laughed, charmed by a joke that wasn't one. "She's a star," he said. "Beautiful lines, open hips, tight core, rare combo." I nodded as if we were two mechanics honoring a well-tuned engine, and not two men standing next to a woman whose smile reached my ribs. Mara touched my shoulder and asked if I needed help carrying more wine from the back. "I always need help," I said, and we slipped into the small corridor behind the bar where the ice machine sings a lonely industrial hymn. She stood too close because there was nowhere else to stand and pressed her forehead to mine. "I love watching you work," she whispered. "You make people unafraid of wanting." "Is that what we're calling it?" I said, and she pulled back an inch, reading me better than anyone. "What is it, Cal?" I could have told her then. I could have said, "I found a bracelet in our bed, and the initials on it are the same as the man whose fingers look very acquainted with back muscles." I could have asked for the story the way I open a bottle, steady hand, gentle twist, a small pop that doesn't spill. But I didn't. Maybe because I wanted more data. Maybe because I wanted one more hour of the way her eyes softened when I handed her a glass. When the tasting ended, and I'd folded the napkins into small, defeated triangles and sent the last couple out into the rain, she was waiting at the bar with an expression like the top of a cake you don't want to ruin with a knife. "Come home with me," she said, as if there were other options that didn't involve gravity. "I need to cash out," I said. "I'll be 20 minutes behind you." "Don't be late," she whispered, and left a kiss on my jaw so light I wanted to chase it. Outside, Alistair was under the awning scrolling through his phone. "Great pours, man," he said. "Good packing." "You left something at my place," I said. His eyes did a small flicker you'd miss if you weren't trying to set the word hours back where it belonged. What?" I took the bracelet from my pocket and held it up like a coin in a street trick. Rain made a quiet applause on the sidewalk. "Ah," he said, and looked honestly surprised in a way I found myself believing against my better judgment. "That's not mine. Similar, though. A lot of us wear those, keeps the strap rash off the wrist when you're teaching straps." "The initials?" I asked, softer than I felt. He leaned closer. "AC, that's no, I mean, weird coincidence. We had a student last week named." "You don't have to invent a list of men with those letters," I said. "I'm not asking for a roll call. I'm asking for clarity." I watched his face the way you watch the first bubbles when a pot thinks about boiling. "I respect your wife," he said, and whatever else had been said about him in this story, he earned those words. Too much to cross that line. She's been very clear. "Clear," I said, and I hated how hungry my voice sounded. That she's married to someone she's actually in love with, he said. We flirt, everyone flirts. It's light, it's movement. But I'm not your villain man. I could have hated him then. Instead, I believed him a little and hated that more. At home, Mara was in one of my shirts, and I was in the kind of mood that sinks ships. She poured herself a glass of water, drank it slow, and set the glass down like a bevel. "Talk to me," she said, and the soft command in her tone undid a dozen small knots. I placed the bracelet on the table between us. "I found this in our bed." She didn't reach for it. She looked at me. "I've been trying to find the right way into this," she said, and I braced for every kind of storm. "It's not what you think," which is also what people say when it is exactly what you think. So let me be unbeautiful and blunt. I waited. "It's mine," she said. "It has initials I don't own." She smiled, crooked. "I bought it for myself when I hit 12 weeks of going to class without making an excuse. AC stands for after complaining. I was going to get AG, always going. But the guy at the shop said initials look better. So AC I didn't tell you because it felt small and silly and mine. I wear it when I work out. I forgot it in the bed because you distracted me with your mouth." "That I can live with," I said, and then the second shoe fell even as the laugh rose in my chest. "In Alistair?" I asked. She slid closer, twinning her legs with mine the way you might tie two ropes that have always known each other. "He's handsome," she said, honestly. "And he watches me move in a way that made me remember I have a body when I was starting to feel like just a calendar of tasks. I like being seen. I didn't do anything that requires anyone's repentance. I did like liking the attention. I should have told you that instead of keeping the glow like a secret." "Attention is a vitamin," I said. "We all need it. You could have asked for mine." "I didn't want it to be charity," she whispered. "Sometimes the person closest to you is too close to notice the picture frame is crooked. And sometimes that person is also the one you want to pin against the counter and kiss when there's a pot boiling and a neighbor can see. And if that neighbor sees, you don't care." "You're mixing metaphors," I said, but my voice had softened enough to be a room you can sleep in. She reached across the small ocean of the table and found my wrist. "I don't want you to worry whenever I say class. I don't want us to be the couple that needs 15 emojis to prove nothing is wrong." "What do you want?" I asked, because clarity is my kink. She tilted her head, thinking with her mouth a little open like she does when she's reading a menu. "I want us to become noisy again. I want you to kiss my collarbone in the hallway. I want to text you from across a table and tell you exactly where my mind is because you put it there. I want to feel like we're getting away with something even when we're paying taxes on time. And I want to stay married to you in a way that doesn't read like a spreadsheet." "Deal," I said, instantly. Because how else do you respond when the person you love offers to fall in love with you in present tense? We made a plan without bullet points. Thursdays would be ours. We'd meet by accident at the hotel bar like strangers who spot each other, and we'd flirt dangerously within the safety of our own story. We'd kiss in the service corridor and let the ice machine sing. We'd cook in too little clothing and pretend the window didn't exist. We'd remind our bodies they have voices and our mouths that they can do more than logistics. The next Thursday, I set the bar up with wines that like to wink. She walked in late, wearing red like she'd finally answered the question the mirror had been asking. I watched her watch me, and when the break came, I found her near the back where the shadows aren't shy. We didn't need a script. "You again," she said, as if we were characters we were making up. "Can I buy you a drink?" I asked, because it's a ritual and rituals are just excuses for choosing each other again. "You can try," she said, and her hand found the bracelet on her wrist and spun it once, the way a saint might touch a medal. AC, I smiled into her hair and didn't say what the initials meant now to me. Already chosen. Alistair came in toward the end alone, offered me a nod, offered Mara a grin that said coach's pride, and took a corner seat that didn't ask for anything. And when I poured the last wine and the room leaned, happy, against its own architecture, I took my wife's hand and led her down the corridor where the ice machine kept singing, and the light forgot to be judged. We didn't break any rules that YouTube would object to. We kissed like a secret you tell by accident, like the kind of scene you fade out of with a smile because leaving it to the imagination is sometimes the most scandalous thing you can do. When we finally came up for air, she pressed her forehead to mine again like she did that first night and whispered, "Thank you for asking the hard question and staying for the answer." On the walk home, the rain had narrowed to a mist. She tucked her arm into mine and tugged me closer. "You're my favorite class," she said, which was ridiculous and perfect. At the door, she paused, turned my wrist and kissed the spot where a bracelet might go. "Come teach me," she said, "and if the neighbor saw, they'll survive." The bracelet lives on our dresser now. When I pick up my keys, my fingers brush leather and steel, and I hear what the initials say to me every morning when she slides past in a robe and glances back to make sure I'm watching. "Always Callum,"